I'm Simon Taylor. I'm the product manager for the Layout Developer application, and what I want to talk to you about today is some tips and tricks related to three of the new features which we added to Layout Developer in the 12.0 release, which came out in September. I'm going to talk about some OpenType stuff, why it's there and how you use it. I'm going to look at some of the stored object features, how you can use those in Layout Developer, and then finally the dynamic blue bar bits. Some of this, if you're a Styler user and you're interested in using Layout Developer source edits in Styler, the OpenType ones will be probably the most applicable to you guys, but knowing about the other stuff is also useful because you can put it to use should you want to in if you want to extend your Styler stuff and maybe use Layout Developer for template development. So let's get started with the OpenType stuff first. So I don't know how much you know about what OpenType is and why it's there, but OpenType is a font format. It's built on top of the TrueType font format, but it includes a whole load of extra information about how to display different glyphs under certain circumstances. So what normal fonts do is they possibly provide some ligature information and some kerning information, but OpenType can provide over 100 different tables of data and information about how to do different things. The OpenType font standard is like I said, it's a standard. This information is put into certain tables which exist inside the font. But not all fonts have the same feature tables created. So some will only have like one or two, but others will have lots of different feature tables provided. The feature tables fall into sort of four main categories, four main types. You have like a standard glyph substitution thing where if your output application is going to present, for example, a G, you might just want to swap it for a different looking G glyph which exists within the font. Or you might want to output a different glyph at the beginning of a word or the end of a word, that kind of thing. Then you have information about glyph placement. So if you have accents and diacritics and that kind of stuff which appear around a character, the feature tables provide a lot of information about where those glyphs get positioned relative to the base glyph. And this is really helpful and important when you're formatting different languages like Hindi or Hebrew or Arabic or any of the other Asian languages with a lot of these characters which appear around like a base character. OpenType does a really good job of that. So turning on OpenType, you'll see some really good improvements in how your content gets output in these languages. Another group is like where the glyph is positioned relative to the text baseline. So this produces better looking content, a better looking output. Sometimes shifting, for example, numbers to align differently on the baseline make things look nicer. And then the other big chunk is glyph control when justifying text. So you might have different glyphs which get output when you're stretching spacing and word spacing, that kind of thing, or you might have different glyphs which appear at the beginning and the end of lines. They might hang out into the text margin, that kind of thing. Within OpenType fonts, you will have your stack of feature tables, but you can refine those by script and by language. So the script represents the sort of writing system, so there would be, for example, Arabic, Latin, or Cyrillic, different types of writing systems. And within each of those writing systems, you might have a different number of languages supported. So you might have Spanish, for example, within the Latin script. Each of those languages and scripts might have a subset of feature tables available to them. So if you don't set a script or a language in Layout Developer, then you have access to all the different feature tables. But if you want to refine it, sort of narrow it down, then you can specify the script and the language if you want to. So this slide really shows some examples of turning on OpenType features and what it sort of gives you. So just used a couple of examples. There's the discretionary ligatures feature table, and as you can see here, this has this fancy looking CT ligature, and also the FI, FFI type of standard ligatures make the text look nicer and it's easier to read. You see how the dot above the I sort of crashes into the ascender of the F. Well, in the ligature, it's much more readable and looks a lot more professional. The other one that's on show here is this old style numbers, where the nines sort of hang below the baseline. Those sort of give a sort of nicer quality of output if you want that kind of thing. But it's really a design choice whether you turn these things on or not. Here we have fractions. So without OpenType, the slash is just another character in the string. But if you turn on the frac feature table within your OpenType font, then you're able to display your strings as proper fractions, which again looks nice, especially if you're formatting a lot of mathematics. If you're going to do this, you need to make sure that you tell layout developer that the slash isn't a word breaking type of character. If you do that, then this stuff just works out of the box. It's good. This other example is showing some Hindi text, how just turning on OpenType does a better job of formatting that. You can see how these words format differently depending on whether OpenType is on or off. No, I don't read Hindi, unfortunately, but this matches what would happen if you do it in something like Word or Design. So I'm happy that this is doing a better job inside Layout Developer than what we did before, which is this example up here. And then finally down here we got some sort of more stylistic look and feel kind of stuff. So this is like a handwriting type of font, and it's got a nice number of different alternatives in it. So these are the SALT feature table is a stylistic alternative, and that will give you not only this kind of thing, but a better looking handwriting effect throughout, like this word efficient, the way the W and the H sort of flow into each other inside which there. So really what OpenType gives you is the opportunity to have better looking text. If your font developers spent a lot of time and effort making stuff look nice, then you can access that by turning on OpenType and then by using the different feature tables. One of the things that we do inside Layout Developer is make each and every feature table which is available inside your font accessible to you individually. We don't group them by type. We don't group them by specific feature, and we don't limit which ones you can access. If it's in the feature, if it's in the font, sorry, then you can access it in Layout Developer. How you do that? Well, firstly, you need to know which feature tables are actually in your font. With Layout Developer 12.0, we shipped a library, an OpenType library, which lets you view the font and which feature tables are available. I'll show you that in a minute. But also you need to know the code for doing that. And in Layout Developer, the style object, if you turn on use OpenType, by setting use OpenType equals true for your style, then this turns on a path through the code which uses a different word shaping tool to the standard one that's built inside Layout Developer. What that means is that words will look different just by turning it on. We're using a different path through the code, so it's going to change the way words are shaped. This might be particularly true at the end of lines, that kind of thing, and you will see a difference. So if you want to turn on OpenType, you will see different line wrappings potentially, and you will see the text shift slightly. So if you want to compare documents between OpenType being on and off, you will definitely see a difference. By default, OpenType word shaping is off. If you want to turn it on, there's code to do that, and you will see some differences. Then when you do have it on, then you can access the OpenType features. So the OpenType fstyle.opentype features lets you set the features which you want to have active at the time. You can set the script which is available, and you can set the language which is available too. So let me show you that working. So as if by magic, here's an example of a block of text. We're going to be looking at these two paragraphs here from the Layout Developer data sheet. So if I turn on this typeface, you can see the characters change. And if I turn on OpenType and refresh, you can see how things change slightly. Do that again. You can see that the kerning between certain characters is different, and some of it moves. So that's just an effect of turning on OpenType in Layout Developer. You will have some feature tables which are active by default for that particular font. So be aware of that. So next I want to turn on the discretionary ligatures, and if I do that, you can see that some things change again. So look particularly down here at this CH ligature. If I turn that off, refresh, you can see it changes back. Turn it on, things look different. You can also see that there's some other changes between other characters as well. If I turn this line on, you can see I'm setting the small caps and the discretionary ligature feature tables, and that replaces all the characters with the small caps version, which is hidden away inside the font file. And then finally, I can turn on the stylistic alternatives. You can see, look particularly at the G inside Engine, for example. If I turn it off, it uses the sort of standard G, which is inside the font. But if I turn on the stylistic alternatives, it gives a different shape of G. So that inside the stylistic alternatives feature table, there's some rules which say if I see a G, instead of outputting the standard glyph, output this other glyph. With Layout Developer, you can access the glyphs by number, and there is a document inside the OpenType library which we provide, which lets you view any and every of the glyphs which is inside a font. We also provide this feature table viewing dialog box, which I mentioned briefly earlier. So let me just choose the font that I'm formatting here, which is Calibri. Here you can see these are the scripts which are available, and the languages which appear within the scripts, and then the feature tables which are available. So you can see which ones are available for you to turn on. By default, there's a superset. You have all of these different feature tables. Inside the ftypeface object, there's a constant which lists all of these, so you can turn them on individually as you wish. One thing to be aware of with Layout Developer is that we don't magic up any feature tables. If they're not in the font, we can't do anything about that. So please make sure that the feature tables you're turning on are actually inside the font before you start turning them on. Otherwise, you won't see any effect. Oh yes, my reminder to show you the example. So that's the first part I wanted to show you. If you wanted to use this stuff inside Styler, then you can certainly use this kind of thing inside a source edit to turn on OpenType and to turn on the feature tables. That stuff is still in there. Okay, so the next thing that we introduced in version 12 was the ability to work more nicely with stored objects. So what are stored objects, and why do I think they're important? Well, stored objects are a way of saving inside your template file a version of the formatting objects that Layout Developer will create for example, blocks or paragraphs or styles, that kind of thing. These things are typically created dynamically as you're formatting through the text. which normally takes up a lot of code. You normally end up writing a lot of code inside your template. If you could use a stored object, it gets around that. You don't have to write so much code in order to format through your content. You don't need so many tags inside your template. And it gives you a different way of working with the styling inside Layout Developer. Excuse me. The reason for making this like a priority is that it makes your templates a lot more easy to maintain, but it also makes them more efficient because they're processing an awful lot less code. They'll be a lot more efficient during the formatting process. So you're not constantly creating these temporary objects. You can store them and just call them by name and use them as you want them. There is a method to create a stored object tag. So the container for the stored object is a special type of tag. It's a JavaScript object tag, .jo. And when you create one, you can nest within it a whole load of new objects and then call them by name from your code. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. What we introduced in version 12 was a better way of working these. Because the objects were not editable, in releases previous to version 12, you couldn't actually do anything with them. You couldn't edit them, you couldn't manipulate them or any of that kind of thing. You just had to create them by code and just trust that they were there. What we did in version 12 in the debugger was provide an interface to those so that you can manipulate them and manage them and create new ones, that kind of thing. So let me show you an example of that. So here we have, this is a demo file. We have it styling pretty nicely, and if I open up the debugger, you can see that there's only 4 tags of note in here. I've got a script that creates those stored objects, so that was what I used when I was creating this sample. We have the main content stream, and we have a context control stream which is applying those stored objects. So if I open this up and we have a look inside the, what's a good one to do, title, datasheet title. Have a look at the onEnter event. You can see here that it's calling a stored object block and starting it, and the onExit event is just ending the block. So if I look at the text version of this, that's what's happening a lot. All I'm doing is calling a block, one of the stored objects, and I'm starting it and then I'm ending it. And all that is doing is creating this formatting that we've got here. The list one is a little bit more complicated. So let's have a look at the list item. Just doing a little bit of extra stuff. So it's actually starting 2 blocks, one for the list item itself and then one for the label, which outputs the bullet, and then another one for the body, so that's wrapping the paragraphs which are there. But really that's only 8 lines of code. It's not doing an awful lot of hard work. Previously there would be a lot of extra lines to set up these blocks and then execute them. So we're getting away from having to write all those extra lines of code. So if I pop open the style object, the JavaScript stored object tag called styles, you can see I've got a list of objects inside here. Here are my blocks. If I look at the one which is being applied up here.
Okay, yeah, you cut out for a minute. If you want to maybe repeat that, I couldn't quite hear you. I'm not sure if the rest of the audience had a difficult time, but maybe for like the last.
How far back?
Just maybe about 5-10 seconds.
Oh, okay, so just go back to opening the JavaScript stored object tag called styles. If I open that up, I can look at the tree of objects. So this is all the new stuff that we've got. If I pop open my datasheet title object and have a look at the default style part of that. So all of these are the properties which are defined for the block object that I'm calling when I start my my datasheet title up here. I can go in here, then I can change the color, make that red, for example. If I refresh, that changes there. So Here I'm just manipulating an object and seeing the result, rather than having to write new code to affect that change, which is pretty cool. With this new interface, you already saw the context control stream part of the new interface. We have this option here to minimize the objects which will be being displayed. So all the ones which have an undefined value or a null value, those are hidden. So you're not overwhelmed by all these extra definitions, but here we can see nice and small. So yeah, this UI lets you manage your stored objects. So if I wanted to create a new one, for example, underneath blocks, I can create a new block object, call it my block. In there, here's my block, and then I can start changing the properties of those, rather than, again, having to write code to do that. So there we go, that's the stored objects stuff I wanted to show you. So stored objects, as I said, are a pretty powerful way of working. Makes life pretty easy for you to create stuff. You're no longer having to write code in order to change your styling. You can make changes and set it up in the debugger just by clicking on the properties that you want to change and saving those inside your layout developer template file. Okay, so hopefully that's interesting to you guys. So the third thing I want to talk about is this idea of the dynamic blue bar. So in layout developer, the blue bar is the bar which appears down the left-hand side. In the UI, it's been pretty static for a long time, but in version 12 we made it more dynamic. This means that you can, as a template developer, you can create sort of custom interfaces to your content and to your template, which lets your users do more with it, and they can get more information from the template while they're working. In order to make that work, you have to turn on the dynamic left bar. So there's a new property, template.left bar, set it to dynamic in the preferences, and this means that you can now start writing to it. So you have a list that you can create for both page mode and text mode, and each one of those lists is a list of left bar item objects. The left bar item, just plonk one on the screen here. So this is a list of left bar items. Here you can see that I've created it to show the XML hierarchy, and if I click on one of those, then I can activate a script inside Layout Developer to do something. So each left bar item has a number of properties. You can show the text that you want to appear. You can have an icon next to it if you really want to. You can give it an ID to help identify it when you're looking through your items, and you can set the indent. The big nice thing is that you can attach a JavaScript function to the click action when somebody clicks on it. I'll show you about that stuff in a minute. So related to the blue bar changes are some events that we've added. So we can now tie JavaScript code to a number of different events which are specific to the template. So if the text which appears in the yellow bar, for example, changes, then you can execute a script, and you can use that script to change the blue bar. If you select a different frame or change the layer, you can also fire off some JavaScript code and then affect the blue bar like that, which is very useful if you want to create a nice bit of interface. So let me go back to this example. So in this example here, I have got three lots of content. I've got a bit of XML content here. This next version is a bit of content with a DTD in it, and the next one on the end is an XML DOM type tag. Each one of these is, well, the content in them is the same, but if I click between the different content streams, you can see how this blue bar changes. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have an event to change when I move within that tag which is open, a content stream which is open, but I have got a refresh button here which lets me refresh this blue bar to redraw it depending on what my context is. So what happens in here is that if I move my cursor to, for example, the abstract element inside the content and refresh the blue bar, I can now see that I am, see what my context is. I'm within abstract, which is the inside body, which is inside datasheet. What I've added to this hierarchy is the ability to select those nodes, which is pretty cool. If I go down to para within a list item, it's a bigger tree, and I can walk up that tree and select different parts of it. What I've also done over here is configured the blue bar to interrogate, in the case of one where I've got the DTD, to interrogate the DTD, but in this case to interrogate a configuration file which I've set up, which lets me see which my allowed children are and what my allowed siblings are. And fingers crossed, if I wrote the code properly, I can add, for example, here, I can add a link child. Clicking on that will add the link into the XML content. Or if I do that again, I can add a new sibling. So I can then start creating XML content using what's allowed inside the DTD. So all this stuff uses the event things I was talking about, as well as the blue bar customization stuff. If I move to page mode, I can see a list of the frames which are on a page, and each of those frames I can see the X, Y, height and width information for it. If I page down, again capturing that page change event, I can get a different list of frames. I can see those properties. If I select one of those frames, I can change the formatting of the item in the list. So here I'm selecting frame 4, applied some underline to the one in the list so I can actually see which one is being selected. If I move around a bit and select different frames, I can see that, and then I can see different bits of information. So here you can see how the blue bar for page mode is working differently to the blue bar for text mode, which is what I wanted it to do. If I page up, capturing the page change event, it's giving me a different list of frames, and then I can select each of those in turn and see it highlighted there to get the frame information. So as I said, that was a feature which we provided in version 12. We're looking to enhance Layout Developer over the next few releases with more interactive components inside the UI, and to refresh the UI bit by bit over the next couple of releases. We're hoping to do some work on the yellow bar in the next release, as well as do some more stuff inside the blue bar, which I hope will be interesting to you guys. This one isn't really applicable to the styler release, but if you do have a document which you're processing using a native Layout Developer template in Publishing Engine, and you want to open it up for some finishing processes, so maybe you want to do some text corrections or move frames around, that kind of thing, then you would do that using the Layout Developer desktop application. You would open up your composed document in this application, and then you can provide tools to those users to help them do that, those processes and those tasks in a nice and easy way using these user interface tools that we're providing.